Sea of Thieves is by no means a new game at this point. For the 6 years it's been out, we've seen plenty of updates to the Pirate Sandbox, and yet throughout all of them, one thing has remained pretty much the same. The game's PvP meta hasn't really been touched since people discovered the strength of double gunning, and more specifically, reach blunder. This has remained the go-to loadout for most PvP players. It remained on top through the removal of quickswap, and through the introduction of 2 brand new weapons. Right now, we're going through possibly the biggest threat to its reign as the best loadout, as Rare, for better or worse, seems to be taking more interest in their weapon balance. The blunder changes that came to life recently initially seemed like they might knock the combo down a peg or two, but honestly, from my experience playing the loadout with the change, it seems just as strong as ever. This new attention to the weapon balance raised the question with me of if it's even a good idea to change the meta after so long. There are plenty of people in the community who will say that it should just be left alone, but there are also plenty of people who will scream about double gunning needing to be nerfed. My opinion is that it should be shifted, but not just by nerfing everything that's powerful into the ground. Realistically, if we just nerf the strongest loadout, then that's 2 guns that will just generally feel unfun to use. I know for 90% of the player base, this doesn't even really affect them. Let's be honest, your average adventure player doesn't care much for the meta. But for the people it does affect, the game will basically just have 2 less weapons. There are much better ways that can give us more variety, while also keeping the weapons feeling fun to use. I think how Rare handled the blunder is perfectly fine. It still feels like a strong weapon for double gunning, once you get used to the new mechanics. Sure, some people will like it, and some definitely won't, but generally I think it was a good attempt to change the weapon. However, there are other ways I would prefer to see the meta shift. Reach blunder has been strong for so long that I don't think it should be touched too much, or at the very least, it wouldn't be my first choice. Instead, I would start by looking at the other weapons and see how you can buff them to bring them more on par, either through simple balance changes or reworks like what we saw with the blunder. Honestly, my biggest reason for this is less of a hatred for reach blunder, which I quite enjoy as a loadout, and more purely so there's more variety during PvP. After doing Hourglass for a while, it just gets boring seeing everyone running the exact same loadout match after match after match. Some variety wouldn't hurt and could definitely help make fights more interesting. So overall, yeah, I think meta shifts are still good even this far into a game's lifespan, but I think touching up the other weapons before we consider nerfing the good ones is just a much better way to go about it. It will generally cause less frustration, hopefully, and if people want to just keep using the same guns, then they can. I don't think anything should be pushed beyond reach and blunder's strength, but I think having other options would just make it more interesting, and maybe people would find a different loadout that they find just as fun. That's just my thoughts as someone who's quite enjoyed PvP in this game. So with all that in mind, I'm curious, what would you guys like to see? I know personally I would love to see a small rework to the sword, just to give it more options and make it feel a little less like spam left click to win. I know I see a lot of people asking for buffs to double barrel and throwing knife, as they didn't really make the impact people were expecting, but I'm curious what ideas you guys have on how to rework or buff these weapons. So let me know, and thank you all for listening. I will hopefully be back soon to cover more of my thoughts on PvP in this game, and what I think Rare can do to help it thrive.